Today's story begins with a phone call. It's the story of how a call from my ex-mother-in-law 3 months after my divorce shook my life to its core and brought everything from an atrocious past back into focus. If you find this story compelling, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your small support means a great deal to us. On a peaceful Sunday afternoon, the phone's chime broke the silence. I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of hot herbal tea and honey in my hands, lost in the pages of a book I'd left half read. It was a sense of peace, so foreign I hadn't dared to dream of it for the past 5 years. My cell phone screen lit up, showing an unknown yet eerily familiar number. I frowned, hesitated for a second, and swiped to answer. Hello? An ex-mother-in-law's voice, sharp and frantic, hit my eardrums, mixed with the sound of ambulance sirens and people shouting. Aria, get down to Metropolitan General Hospital right now. Marcus has been in a car wreck. It's serious. The doctor says they need to operate immediately, but we need $35,000 for the deposit. Bring the money fast and save your husband. If you don't hurry, it'll be too late. I froze for a moment. That voice, that arrogant and commanding voice, I'd recognize it even if I were dust and ashes. It was my ex-mother-in-law, Ms. Helena Vance. But wait a minute. Your husband? What was she talking about? I set the teacup down on the table, and it rang with a slight chime. I took a deep breath, hoping the soft aroma of the tea would calm the pounding in my heart, rattled by the surprise. And then I burst out laughing, a light laugh tinted with mockery, but charged with a contempt that reached the sky. Excuse me, I think you have the wrong number, I replied, my voice so serene it was glacial. Or maybe your age is affecting your memory. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a louder scream exploded, as if she meant to shatter the phone's speaker. What are you saying? I am your mother-in-law, Marcus's mother. Your husband is bleeding to death in the emergency room. You are his wife, so get the money and save him. $35,000. The figure that tumbled from her mouth sounded as light as a feather. Did she consider me a money-printing machine? Or did she still think I was the same naive, oppressed Aria of 3 months ago? I stood up and walked to the railing, watching the people rushing about their errands below. The evening breeze ruffled my hair. I felt the aroma of freedom, a freedom won with blood and tears. Ms. Helena, I said, calling her by her name, no longer using the old title of Mother Vance. I believe you should take some memory vitamins. It has been 3 months since the judge finalized the divorce. Your son, Mr. Marcus, and I are nothing to each other anymore. Why should I care if he lives, dies, has an accident, or is sick for you to ask me to bring $35,000? By what right? And who are you to ask me? On the other end of the line, her frantic breathing was clearly audible. She must have been in shock, perhaps surprised that her submissive ex-daughter-in-law dared to talk back, or by my coldness, or perhaps because she realized her illusory authority had vanished like a soap bubble. You, how dare you speak to me like that? Despite everything, you shared a bed for years. There is a measure of affection. He is my son. Can you just stand by and watch him die? You heartless woman, I'm going to tell everyone your true colors. She began her usual string of threats and emotional blackmail. I smiled. Now it was a smile tinged with a little of the bitterness of the past. Affection. You dare mention that word to me? Did you think of affection that stormy night when you and your son kicked me out of the house? Did you think of affection when your son hit me until my face was bruised for defending his young mistress? Did you think of affection when, during the divorce proceedings, you encouraged him to hide all our assets so I would leave empty-handed with a young daughter? I paused, swallowing the bitter knot forming in my throat. It felt like the heart wounds I thought had healed were bleeding again under her fingernails, but it no longer hurt. It just seemed ridiculous. Ms. Helena, I heard your son is about to get married again, isn't that right? To that Savannah, so beautiful and smart, they say she's from a good family and carries the grandson you long for in her womb. Why don't you call her? She has a lot of money. Ask her to bring the funds to save her future husband. Don't be ridiculous by calling the ex-wife. The other side of the phone fell into silence. Only her ragged breathing and the chaotic hospital noise could be heard. I must have hit a nerve. Something must have happened to that magnificent future daughter-in-law for her to swallow her pride and call me, whom she considered trash. "Savannah, that girl—" Ms. Helena's voice suddenly cracked, losing all its strength and arrogance. "That girl disappeared with all the money. I beg you, please, just this once, save Marcus. I'm pleading with you." "I'm sorry, but I am neither a saint nor a charity bank. Those $35,000 are for raising my daughter. Yes, that same granddaughter you once called a useless girl. I'm hanging up." I pressed the end call button firmly. The screen went black, and the endless beep seemed to cut the last thread binding me to that hellish family. I slumped back into my chair. My hands still trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the long-suppressed anger now emerging. It had only been 3 months since I walked out the door of that suburban mansion. They must have thought I was dying in some miserable rented room, that I would crawl back on my knees to beg for their affection. But life is unpredictable. Today's Aria was no longer yesterday's Aria. And Marcus, the man who betrayed me for another woman, now lay there waiting for death, abandoned by that very mistress, Karma. It sounds like an ethereal word, but is there any other that, at this moment, manifests more clearly and cruelly in reality? I took a sip of the herbal tea. The sweetness of the honey and the slight bitterness of the infusion mingled on my tongue. I remembered the day 5 years ago when I first stepped into Ms. Helena's house as her daughter-in-law. Back then, I too naively believed in the word family. I dedicated my whole heart, my money, and my youth to that home. And what did I receive in return? Vile betrayal and a cruel calculation that chilled me to the bone. Can you believe it? I, who was earning $5,000 a month, had to hand over my entire bank account to my mother-in-law, and every morning I received barely $15 for groceries. A wife who gave everything for her husband, unaware that he was secretly cheating on her for 2 years inside that very house. And the height of shamelessness? They tried to sell me out to get money to support the mistress. The story of my life, my tear-filled marriage, and my dazzling transformation to take revenge in the most civilized way has only just begun. What Ms. Helena just said on the phone is only the tip of a giant iceberg. Why has Marcus ended up in this situation? What is the true identity of the mistress, Savannah? And what did I do to make them face the music? The cup on the table had already cooled, but the bitter aftertaste of the call still permeated my tongue, every corner of my memory. I closed my eyes and surrendered to the evening breeze. Time rewinded 5 years, to the day when I, at 25 years old, full of faith in love and vitality, happily entered Ms. Helena's house, dressed in an immaculate wedding gown. That day, everyone said I had married well. My then-husband, Marcus, looked intellectual and peaceable, and was the only son of a family with a suburban mansion in a nice area of Atlanta. I, though from a small town in South Carolina, had graduated with excellent grades from a prestigious university and worked as a marketing director with a salary everyone envied. But in the eyes of my in-laws, I was nothing more than an ambitious newcomer. As the saying goes, you don't know there are roaches until you move in. That seemingly perfect house was actually a suffocating prison that trapped my youth and my freedom. On our wedding night, without even having unwrapped the gifts, Ms. Helena called me into the living room. Sitting in a carved mahogany chair, she handed me a paper full of family rules with an impassive face. "Aria, it's a great blessing that you've entered our family as a daughter-in-law. I will tell you beforehand how you must behave. There are only a few of us in this house, and Marcus's father passed away early, so I raised my son alone. That's why I cannot stand to see my son lose out. Starting this month, I will manage both of your salaries, yours and Marcus's." I was stunned and stammered. "How? But Mother Vance, we are adults. We want to manage our money, handle our expenses, and save." "Save what?" Ms. Helena cut me off with a sharp voice. You young people, as soon as you have money, you spend it foolishly. I manage it for your own good. When you have an important need, I will give it to you. Or are you worried that I will keep it? Marcus agrees. A wife must obey her husband. I looked at my husband, hoping he would defend me, but Marcus kept his head down, peeling an apple. Leave it to my mother, honey. She will do better than you. Don't be so calculating with my mother. His words were like a splash of cold water, but since I was a newlywed and wanted to live in peace, I swallowed my tears and handed over my bank account. And that was the beginning of my conversion into a well-paid servant without a salary. Every morning before going to work, I had to get up at dawn to clean the spacious 4-floor home and go to the market to prepare breakfast. Ms. Helena was very demanding. The broth for the stew had to be made with bones from the night before, and the greens had to be washed leaf by leaf. Afterward, I rushed on my motorcycle to the office, where I worked frantically under the pressure of being a team lead. In the evening, when my colleagues suggested going to a spa or a coffee shop, I had to rush home to be on time for dinner. Marcus, upon returning from work, would sit on the sofa with his legs crossed, watching TV, waiting for the table to be set. Ms. Helena would return from her exercise class and complain about any speck of dust on the staircase, or if the soup was bland or too salty. The most humiliating thing was the money issue. My salary was $5,000. Marcus's was $2,500, and everything was in Miss Helena's safe. Every morning, she gave me exactly $15, $5 for my lunch and commute, and the other $10 for the evening dinner groceries for 3 people. Manage it well, and don't waste it on foolish things, she warned me, looking at the bills as if she feared I would steal from her. $10 for dinner for 3 people in an expensive city like Atlanta. I had to rack my brain, go to the farmer's market early in the morning, and haggle for fish or vegetables. Some days, to buy a chicken for a good broth for my husband, I skipped lunch and filled my stomach with water to offset the expense. Once, I needed a dress for the company Christmas party. I opened the closet and only found old college clothes. I mustered my courage and asked Miss Helena for $250 for a new dress. She looked at me as if I was asking her to rob a bank. A dress to seduce who? You're already married. Just wear anything. $250 is some people's entire grocery budget for a month. Don't be so wasteful. I felt so humiliated that I ran to my room crying and complained to Marcus. He, who was playing a video game, frowned, annoyed by hearing me. Don't make such a fuss over a dress. My mother is right. Stop being so shallow. You look fine to me even in your pajamas. At that moment, I realized my husband was not only a weakling, but also cruelly insensitive. He was used to his mother's protection and took my servitude for granted. In his and his mother's eyes, I was nothing more than a money-making machine and a domestic robot without desires or feelings. I considered divorce then, but 2 clear lines appeared on the pregnancy test. The baby, who arrived at the most desperate moment, became the rope that tied me to that hell. I consoled myself. Come on, hold on a little longer for the baby. When the grandchild is born, Ms. Helena will change and Marcus will mature. But I was wrong. My silent sacrifice, far from being respected, was ruthlessly trampled upon with the appearance of a third person. She entered and shattered the facade of false family happiness. When my daughter Zola turned 2 years old, there was a small change in Marcus's work life. He was promoted to section chief. His salary didn't increase much, but dinners with clients and meetings with partners became frequent. I started noticing a strange change in my husband. Marcus worried more about his appearance. He put on cologne every time he went out, and, most importantly, he never parted with his cell phone. He changed the password, always left it face down, and often went out to the balcony in the middle of the night to speak in whispers. My woman's intuition alerted me to a bad omen, but every time I asked him, Marcus denied everything. Stop being so suspicious. I have enough stress at work without you interrogating me like a cop at home. Where am I supposed to relax? Ms. Helena, seeing our arguments, always took her son's side. He works himself to death out there to support you and your daughter, and you get jealous like a child. A jealous woman is the dumbest kind. Once again, I swallowed my rage and remained silent. Until one day, while Marcus was showering, I casually saw a message pop up on his lock screen. "Honey, come over tonight. I miss you. Our baby misses his daddy too." The sender was Savannah Secretary. I felt the world crumble. Our baby. It meant Marcus had another child. With trembling hands, I secretly unlocked the phone. Fortunately, the night before, I had seen him enter the password. What I saw were countless sappy messages and intimate photos of Marcus with a young, pretty, and sexy woman. She was the new secretary of an associated company, and her name was Savannah. But what plunged me into despair were not the whispers of love, but the bank transfer records. "Honey, send me $100 for the vitamins. Gotta take good care of our heir." "Love, what a beautiful Chanel bag. It only costs $4,000. Buy it for me, okay? I'll ask my mother for some money and send it to you." My legs went weak. The salary I earned with the sweat of my brow and gave to my mother-in-law was not being saved, as she claimed. It was being given to Marcus, and Marcus was using it to support his mistress. An even more terrible fact was revealed when reviewing old messages. A conversation between Marcus and his mother. Marcus: "Mom, Savannah had an ultrasound. The doctor says it's a boy, 90% sure, your grandson." Ms. Helena: "Really? Oh, what a blessing. Well done, son. Take good care of her. You don't know how tired I was of Aria only giving me a girl. For now, don't tell Aria anything. When Savannah gives birth, we'll see. If you need money, tell me. We can support my grandson with Aria's salary." I dropped the phone on the bed. The sound was like my heart shattering. This family was an organized band of scammers. The woman I had called my mother-in-law and cooked for 5 years was an accomplice to her son's adultery. Far from preventing it, she was using the money earned by my sweat to raise the fetus in her son's mistress's womb. All because of that antiquated and cruel patriarchal mindset. She had never bought my daughter Zola, her blood granddaughter, a single carton of milk or a piece of candy. She despised her, calling her a useless girl. But for the unborn son of a stranger, she was willing to support him even at the cost of scamming her daughter-in-law. Hate, rage, pain. All negative feelings churned in my chest until I was breathless. I wanted to run to the living room and tear the disgusting masks off that pair, but my businesswoman's rationality stopped me. If I caused a scene now, what would I gain? Marcus would deny it, or, in the worst case, he would leave with his mistress. Miss Helena would join him in throwing my daughter and me onto the street. The properties were in their name or Marcus's, and I didn't have a single penny. I would lose everything and start a life of hardship. Calm down. You have to make a plan. You have to get this rotten family out of your life and take back what is yours. I wiped away my tears. I put the phone back where it belonged and tried to calm my breathing. Marcus came out of the bathroom, whistling. I continued folding the child's clothes, with a face as serene as a lake before a storm. "Are you finished showering? Are you having dinner at home tonight?" I asked sweetly, as if I knew nothing. "No, I have to see a client with the boss today. I'll be late. You two have dinner," Marcus said, as he combed his hair and put on cologne. Now I knew that cologne was for another woman. "Okay, be careful." As I watched Marcus's back disappear behind the door, my sweet smile faded. In its place appeared a sharp gaze. "Enjoy it while you can. These will be your last happy days. Now that I know the truth, the price you will pay will be higher than you can imagine." In the following days, I began to secretly investigate Savannah. Who was she? Why did she take an interest in an indecisive man with a modest salary and full of pretensions like Marcus? And most importantly, I discovered that Marcus and Ms. Helena were plotting a terrible conspiracy to snatch away the only property I had, a plot of land my parents had given me as a wedding gift. What did they intend to do with that land? And how did I manage to turn the tables and use their own trick against them? Would the truth about the male grandchild and the mistress, Savannah, be as simple as they thought? Since that fateful night when I discovered the secret on my husband's cell phone, I lived like a ghost in that house. On the outside, I was still the obedient daughter-in-law. I went to work, prepared meals, but inside, my heart was cold and full of suspicion. I knew that this false peace was only the calm before a great storm, and that storm, sooner than I thought, came not from the mistress, but from the endless greed of mother and son. One weekend evening, Ms. Helena, unusually, went into the kitchen herself to prepare my favorite dish, a rack of lamb stew. She served me a plate with kindness, and her smile was so sweet it gave me chills. Marcus, sitting next to me, was also strangely affectionate, constantly asking if my work was too hard. After dinner, Miss Helena called us into the living room. She served a cup of tea, cleared her throat, and began to speak. "Arya, Marcus has been doing well at work lately, and a good opportunity has come up for him to invest with some friends and open a chain of restaurants, but he lacks some capital. That's why I was wondering if you could help your husband." I took a sip of tea, hiding a smile. "How could I help him? Since you manage all my salary, where would I get the money?" Ms. Helena hesitated for a moment and then went straight to the point. "Your parents gave you a plot of land by the highway as a wedding gift, right? I heard its value has increased a lot. Go home and convince your parents to sell it. With that money, we can finance Marcus's business. If your husband does well, it will ultimately be good for you, won't it, Marcus?" Next to her, he supported her, his eyes shining. "Yes, honey, it's a unique opportunity. Sell it. I promise I'll pay you back in 2 years. When I make money, I'll buy you a plot of land twice as big." I looked at mother and son with absolute contempt. That land was my last refuge, the property my parents had bought with their life savings for their retirement, and they dared to ask me to sell it. In reality, thanks to spying on Marcus's phone and eavesdropping on Ms. Helena's calls, I already knew what business opportunity they were talking about. There was no chain of restaurants. The truth was that Marcus had gotten into huge debt from gambling and sports betting. The debt amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the loan sharks had threatened to break his legs if he didn't pay. Furthermore, the mistress Savannah was threatening to abort his precious son if he didn't buy her a luxury apartment to spend her pregnancy quietly. Marcus and Ms. Helena were between a rock and a hard place. They couldn't sell the house they lived in so as not to lose their reputation with the neighbors. So they had set their sights on my only property. They intended to fleece me out of every last dime to support the mistress and pay off gambling debts. "That land is in my parents' name. I have no right to sell it," I replied coldly, setting down the teacup with a decisive gesture. Ms. Helena's face hardened, and her smile vanished. "Well, you go and butter up your parents. You are their only daughter. Who else are they going to give it to if not you? Does it hurt you to give it to your husband? Is his business at stake?" "Business or a load of debts?" I asked casually, looking directly at Marcus. Marcus flinched and spilled his glass of water. "What nonsense are you talking about? I'm a serious businessman. What debts?" "All right," I said, feigning a sigh and standing up. "I'll think about it. It's an important decision. I can't decide right now." I walked to my room, leaving the mother and son sitting with dissatisfied looks. That night, I heard an argument coming from Ms. Helena's room. "Mom, look how stubborn she is. If she doesn't sell the land, I'm dead. The loan sharks told me to pay next week, and Savannah is threatening to leave." "Don't worry, I'll take care of her. If it doesn't work the easy way, we'll have to do it the hard way. She lives in our house and we have her daughter. Where is she going to go? If we pressure her, she'll eventually give in." Upon hearing those cruel words, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. They didn't see me as family, but as prey. I had to act before they did. The next day, I took the day off secretly. I gathered all my important documents and the land deed I had hidden and deposited them in a safety deposit box at the bank. And to have evidence, I installed a small hidden camera in the living room. But I couldn't imagine that their cruelty would go beyond asking me for money. It was their greed and lust that brought the tragedy to its climax and caused that fateful stormy night I will never forget. One Friday afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Marcus hugging a woman around the waist, entering a luxury downtown hotel, and a provocative message. "Little sister, your husband takes very good care of me and our baby. You just stay home and cook, okay?" The sender was none other than Savannah. She was provoking me. She wanted me to lose my temper and leave on my own, clearing the way for her to move into Ms. Helena's house. My blood boiled. I couldn't take it anymore. I left my daughter with my mother and took a taxi to the address in the photo. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to end this farce with a three-way confrontation in front of room 302. My heart was pounding. I took a deep breath and knocked. "Who is it?" Marcus's voice, with a hint of alcohol, was heard. "Room service." The door opened. Marcus, wearing only a towel around his waist, had a flushed face. Inside, Savannah, wearing a thin nightgown, was lying on the bed, gently stroking her slightly protruding belly with a triumphant expression. Seeing me, Marcus turned pale and froze. "Aria, what are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I walked into the room and stared at Savannah. She didn't seem scared at all. On the contrary, she smiled and slowly sat up. "Hello, Aria. How timely. Marcus just promised to buy a house for me and our baby." "Marcus," I said, turning to my husband with a voice trembling with contained anger, "where are you going to get the money to buy a house for that woman? From the money from the sale of my parents' land? Or from the money you've been stealing from my salary all these years?" Marcus looked alternately at Savannah and me, not knowing what to do. Savannah curled her lips. "Don't be so harsh. He's the precious heir of this family. What's wrong with spending a little money? I'm giving it to him instead of you, who can't even have sons. You should be grateful to me." "Grateful?" I laughed bitterly. "Grateful to you? A woman who steals husbands and bleeds them dry? Do you think he loves you? He's just using the child you carry in your womb to get money from his mother, and you're only interested in his money. You deserve each other. How disgusting!" "Shut up!" Marcus suddenly yelled, lunging at me. "How dare you insult Savannah? She's carrying my son!" "Your son? Are you sure it's your son?" I spat out the doubt I had harbored for a long time. That sentence was the fuse to the bomb. Savannah started screaming and throwing a fit. "Honey, she's cursing our baby. She wants to kill our son. Hit her!" Marcus, blinded by alcohol and the urge to protect his mistress, raised his hand without hesitation. A dry sound and a burning sensation on my cheek. I staggered and fell, hitting my head against the corner of a table. Blood started to flow. I looked at the man I once called my husband. He was standing with clenched fists and bloodshot eyes, without a trace of remorse. "Get out of here! Get out of my sight, you witch!" Marcus roared. I got up, staggering, and wiped the blood from my forehead. I looked at Savannah, who was smiling triumphantly, and at Marcus, as fierce as a beast. It no longer mattered. My tears had dried up. "Fine. I'm leaving. I leave this garbage to you. I hope you're happy in your filth." I rushed out of the hotel and took a taxi straight home. I had to talk to Ms. Helena. I held a small hope that, although greedy, she was still a mother and a grandmother. I thought that if she knew her son had hit his wife for a mistress, she might have some conscience left. But I was completely wrong. When I arrived home, it was pouring rain. I entered the living room, soaked and with blood on my forehead. Ms. Helena was watching TV and was surprised to see me. "What happened to you? Are you crazy? What do you look like? Are you going to embarrass the family?" "Mother Vance," I said, my voice trembling. "Marcus is cheating on me. He hit me. He was supporting that woman with the family money." I expected her to be surprised and ask me what had happened. But no. Ms. Helena took a sip of tea without taking her eyes off the TV and said coldly, "I know." I froze. She knew. She knew and did nothing. She encouraged her son to be unfaithful to me. Ms. Helena turned to me with a look of contempt I will never forget. "What's wrong with a man having a little fun outside the house? The important thing is that Savannah is going to give us a son. She's smart and nice. What have you done for this house in all these years? only giving birth to a girl, being stingy with money, and refusing to sell land to help your husband. You are a useless daughter-in-law. Mother Vance! Don't call me mother-in-law. It gives me the chills. She stood up and pointed to the door. Marcus called me. He says you behaved rudely and insulted his girlfriend. We don't need a daughter-in-law like you in this house. If you have any decency, disappear from my sight right now. That way, I can bring Savannah in. I won't let my precious grandson be raised on the street. Are you kicking me out in the middle of the night? I asked, trembling. Get out now, or you'll make a scene here. Having said that, she rushed into my room, forcefully stuffed some of my clothes into an old suitcase, and threw it out into the yard. Out, and don't even think about taking anything from this house. You say Zola is with your parents? Well, let her stay there. We won't raise a useless girl in this house. I stood in the middle of the yard under the cold, pouring rain. The blood from my forehead mixed with the water. My suitcase was thrown into a puddle. The heavy door slammed shut in front of me, cutting off all affection and hope. I looked up at the imposing 4-story house, the place where I had invested 5 years of my youth, cleaning every brick, cooking every meal. Now it had become a cold fortress that rejected me. That stormy night, dragging the heavy suitcase, I stumbled out of the familiar alley. I didn't look back. I knew I had just escaped from hell, hurt and humiliated, but I had survived. And I swore to heaven that those who had thrown my daughter and me onto the street that night would pay for it. I hailed a taxi, returned to my parents' house, hugged my daughter, and cried uncontrollably. After that stormy night, I returned to my parents' house with a broken body and a wounded heart. My parents, seeing their haggard daughter and confused granddaughter, were devastated. My father, a peaceful man all his life, banged the table and shouted, "Divorce him right now! Don't we have a plate of food for you and your daughter in this house? Don't have any consideration for those ungrateful people." Thanks to my parents' support, the next morning, I filed for divorce. I thought everything would end quickly and we would all go our separate ways, but I underestimated the cruelty of Ms. Helena and her son. For them, divorce was not the end of a relationship, but the last chance to fleece me out of every last dime before expelling me from their lives forever. The first conciliation hearing took place in a suffocating atmosphere of tension. Ms. Helena and Marcus showed up at the courthouse, accompanied by a lawyer and even strangers, who I later learned were false witnesses. Marcus, sitting opposite me, had lost all the ferocity of the previous night and wore a cold, calculating face. He didn't look at me once, focusing on his papers. When the judge asked about the division of assets and custody, Marcus's lawyer stood up and presented an argument that left me stunned. "Your Honor, my client requests custody of Zola. Mrs. Monroe lacks the moral qualification as a mother. She has committed adultery, neglected her home, and currently has no stable income or fixed residence, living off borrowed time at her parents' house." I jumped up and shouted, "That's a lie! He's the adulterer. He has another woman and even a child with her." Ms. Helena immediately intervened, pointing her finger at me. "Don't scream. Don't say stupid things. My son is a decent man. Who knows what kind of man you've been sleeping with while you claim to be working day and night? I have proof here." She threw a wad of blurry photos onto the table, showing me having lunch and coffee with a business partner. The photos, taken secretly, were cleverly angled to look intimate. They had even hired a stranger to pose as my lover and testify that we had been seeing each other secretly for 2 years. My blood boiled. They not only wanted to take my daughter away, but to completely destroy my reputation. They wanted to turn me into an unfaithful woman to justify throwing me out and keeping my assets. As for the fortune, Marcus claimed that all the family savings came from his work and that my salary was barely enough for my personal expenses. He brazenly denied that Ms. Helena had managed my entire salary for the last 5 years. I looked at Marcus and Ms. Helena with a nausea that rose in my throat. How could anyone be so vile? Not content with devouring my flesh, they now wanted to drink every last drop of my blood. But they had forgotten one thing. I am a businesswoman. I could endure it for my family. But when cornered, I know how to defend myself. I took a deep breath and signaled to my lawyer. He calmly opened his briefcase and presented the crucial evidence I had secretly gathered. First, regarding the adultery accusation, we presented the security camera recordings from the company, showing that those meetings were work-related and always in the presence of other colleagues. We also presented the recording of that night's argument, where Marcus admitted to having a child with Savannah, and Ms. Helena's voice was heard kicking me out of the house. The false witness, after a few questions from my lawyer, stammered, became nervous, and finally confessed that they had paid him $300 to act. Second, regarding the assets, we presented bank statements for the last 5 years. Although Ms. Helena asked me for the money in cash, my company deposited the salary into my account. I proved that the periodic withdrawals coincided with the dates when she made deposits into her savings account, the passbook of which I had also secretly photographed. Most importantly, the deed for the wedding gift land explicitly stated an exclusive donation to my daughter, Aria, and was notarized before the marriage. Legally, it was separate property. Marcus was not entitled to even an inch of that land. The court, after examining the evidence, dismissed all of Marcus's ridiculous petitions. It granted me custody of Zola and ordered Marcus to pay monthly child support. The land was recognized as my separate property. As for the savings, having handed them over in cash, I could not recover them due to lack of proof that Ms. Helena managed them on my behalf. I lost 5 years of salary, but I saved my daughter and my honor, and that was the greatest victory. Upon leaving the courthouse, Ms. Helena, pale with rage at not having gotten the land, insulted me. "Go ahead. Consider it a donation from me. Do you think things will go well for you after leaving your husband? You'll see how you live miserably all your life, hugging that child." Marcus looked at me with hatred. "You think you're so smart, but don't think you've won. Without me, you're just a divorced woman with a burden. What man is going to look at you?" I looked directly into the eyes of mother and son and smiled proudly. "Thank you for your concern. Worry about that valuable mistress of yours and her wonderful son instead. For me, leaving that house is a blessing." I hugged my daughter and got into the car. I left behind their faces disfigured by greed and hatred. The gate of hell had closed. A new world was opening before me. Although the road ahead was full of thorns, at least I could breathe the air of freedom. 3 months, 90 days. It's not a long time, but for someone who knows how to rise from the abyss, it's enough time to completely change their destiny. The first days after the divorce were very hard. I rented a small apartment to live with my daughter, taking on the role of both father and mother and the economic responsibility. At night, while sleeping with my daughter in my arms, I often wet the pillow with tears of sadness for the still open wounds in my heart. Marcus's betrayal and Ms. Helena's cruelty tormented me even in my dreams. But every morning, seeing the innocent smile of my daughter, Zola, I promised myself, "You cannot break down. You cannot let your enemies rejoice at your misfortune. The sweetest revenge is not insults or fights, but living a life 1,000 times happier and brighter than when you were with them." I threw myself into work like a maniac. With my experience and skills, and no longer constrained by domestic problems, my concentration sharpened, and I quickly regained my professional worth. I secured 3 major contracts in a row for the company. I earned the recognition of my superiors and was promoted to marketing director, doubling my salary. With the money, I started investing in myself. I cut my long, neglected hair and exchanged it for an elegant bob cut. I threw away the old, baggy clothes that Ms. Helena forced me to wear and replaced them with elegant office suits that highlighted my long, hidden figure. I started practicing yoga, taking care of my skin, and learning to apply light makeup. In the mirror was a completely different Aria, young, sophisticated, and full of life. My eyes, previously clouded by sadness, now shone with confidence and charisma. Colleagues and men from associated companies began to look at me with admiration and approach me, but I was not in a hurry. I fully enjoyed the happiness of being a proud, single woman. While my life shone brighter and brighter across town, Marcus and his family's life began its decline. Through some mutual friends, vague rumors reached me that Marcus was in serious trouble. After the divorce, Marcus proudly brought Savannah to live in his house, as if they were husband and wife. Ms. Helena, delighted, treated her new daughter-in-law, pregnant with the heir, like a queen. But the good times did not last. Marcus invested all his savings and borrowed money from friends to open a fancy restaurant to Savannah's taste. She imagined a future where she would sit as the owner, moving only a finger to count the money. But Savannah was all facade. She was ignorant and lazy. Instead of controlling the quality of the food, she squandered money on decoration and luxury purchases. 2 months after the opening, the restaurant was empty. The food was bad, the staff unfriendly, and customers stopped going. The capital ran out, and the interest from the bank and the loan sharks began to crush Marcus. To top it all off, misfortune also struck at his main job. Distracted by the restaurant's problems and his mistress's whims, he neglected his responsibilities and made a serious mistake on an important contract, causing major losses to the company. He was reprimanded by his superiors, demoted to a lower position, and his salary was cut in half. Due to money problems, the atmosphere in Ms. Helena's 4-story house became suffocating. Laughter about a bright future was no longer heard at the table, only sighs and arguments. Once I casually ran into Marcus at the supermarket. He was pushing Savannah's shopping cart. He was haggard, with a messy beard and worn clothes. Savannah, next to him, frowning, kept scolding him because he couldn't buy her the expensive imported grapes she wanted. Upon seeing me, his ex-wife, in a striking red dress, high heels, a designer handbag, and laughing happily with my daughter, Marcus was so surprised that he dropped the carton of milk he was holding. He stared at me. Surprise, regret, and shame mingled in his eyes. I walked past him like the wind, without even greeting him. At that moment, I knew I had won, not because I was richer than him, but because I had recovered the self-worth I lost when I was with him. But that was only the beginning of his family's downfall. When the money ran out, the love ran out. The mistress Savannah, whom Miss Helena treated like a jewel, began to show her true colors as a greedy and shameless tramp. A new version of the mother-in-law/daughter-in-law conflict was about to erupt, and it was 100 times more terrible than the one I had experienced. While I enjoyed the glorious days of my life, across town, in that 4-story house where I buried my youth, a tragic comedy unfolded daily. I didn't seek out this news. As the saying goes, good news travels far, but bad news travels even farther. Old neighbors who hated Miss Helena's arrogance told me, gossiping, that since Savannah moved in, Miss Helena had aged 10 years. If she previously hated me because my competence and meticulousness made her feel inferior, she was now experiencing firsthand what it meant to bring a tiger into the house. Savannah, 4 months pregnant, moved into that house and was treated like gold, but the mask of the sweet, docile woman was removed right after she succeeded in getting me completely kicked out. Savannah revealed herself to be lazy, rude, and a true professional scammer. Every morning she got up when the sun was already high, and there was no talk of cleaning the house or cooking. She didn't even wash the plate she ate from. "Mother Vance, what's for breakfast today? Noodle soup with beef? I don't like it. It's too greasy. I have a craving for high-end lobster rolls. I know they're super expensive, but your grandson needs them. Go to the market in the city and buy me the best they have." Savannah, lying on the sofa while doing her nails, gave orders to Ms. Helena. The same Ms. Helena who forced me to get up at 5 in the morning to make bone broth now had to go out to buy high-end food for her new daughter-in-law. With a resentful voice, she told her, "Even if you are pregnant, you have to move a little. If you spend the day lying down, it will be hard to give birth." Aria, even when she was about to give birth, cleaned the house with energy. Upon hearing my name, Savannah jumped up and glared at her. "Don't compare me to that small-town woman, your ex-daughter-in-law. I am a valuable woman. I carry the appreciated lineage of this family. If you like her so much, call her to serve you. I'm tired and can't." Ms. Helena was speechless. No one had ever talked back to her like that. But thinking about Savannah's bulging belly and the long-awaited son, she swallowed her bitterness and went out to act as a servant for her daughter-in-law. In addition to being lazy, Savannah was a money-spending machine. While Marcus's business was going downhill, the restaurant was losing money and debts were piling up. Savannah spent money recklessly, as if it were nothing. Every day, packages with cosmetics and designer handbags arrived. Where did the money come from? Savannah demanded it from Marcus without rest, and if he didn't give it to her, she cried, made a scene, and threatened to abort or have a depression. Marcus, infatuated with Savannah and not wanting to lose face in front of his pretty wife, even borrowed money from loan sharks to give Savannah for her expenses. The climax of the conflict erupted one night when the loan sharks who had given him money to open the restaurant knocked on the door to collect the interest. Marcus was not home, and Ms. Helena had to go out to plead with them, humiliated. Upon returning home, she found Savannah doing a live stream, showing off the several $100s worth of cosmetics she had just bought. Ms. Helena couldn't take it anymore. She lunged at her, snatched the phone from her hands, and smashed it against the floor, screaming, "What kind of woman are you? Your husband is drowning in debt. I have to swallow my shame and beg the collectors. And you're busy shopping. Won't you be happy until you ruin this family?" Savannah, seeing her phone shattered, lost her mind. She stood up and pushed Ms. Helena, who hit the corner of a table. "You crazy old woman, how dare you break my phone? The money I spend is given to me by my husband. What does it have to do with you? If this house is ruined, it's because your son is useless and a fool. Not my fault. On top of me doing him the favor of being his woman without a wedding or recognition, now you come here to lecture me." Ms. Helena, grabbing her aching back, looked with horror at the daughter-in-law she had once praised for being smart and nice. "How dare you hit your mother-in-law? You rude girl! I'm going to kick you out of this house." "Kick me out?" Savannah scoffed. Her smile twisted into a defiant gesture. "Try it. I'll leave with your grandson, see if your family's lineage dies out. And don't forget, that restaurant, even if it's losing money, is legally in my name. If I sell it right now, who do you think will lose out?" At that moment, Marcus arrived, reeking of alcohol. Seeing his mother on the floor and his wife defiant, he rushed to separate them. "Enough! Stop, both of you! Do you want to kill me?" Marcus shouted desperately. Ms. Helena grabbed her son's legs, crying, "Marcus, look how your mother hits me. You left Arya to bring this thing into the house?" Marcus looked alternately at his mother and Savannah, and the house turned into a battlefield. He dropped his arms powerlessly. He couldn't scold Savannah because she held his future in her hands, but it hurt him to see his mother mistreated. "Savannah, please stop. My mother is old," Marcus said softly. "You shut up, you weakling. Your mother hits me, breaks my things, and you take her side. Very well. Since you've conspired to torment me, I'm leaving. I don't want this garbage house." Savannah went up to her room in a fury and slammed the door shut. Miss Helena collapsed on the floor, crying loudly, and Marcus banged his head against the wall, tearing at his hair. The scene must have been so pathetic that just hearing about it made me shudder. Karma had arrived too quickly and had struck directly at what Ms. Helena valued most, her dignity and the hope of continuing her lineage. She had kicked out a kind daughter-in-law and brought a queen who oppressed her into the house. A week after that heated argument, Marcus's financial situation completely collapsed. The restaurant had to close, unable to cover expenses. The loan sharks gave him an ultimatum. If he didn't repay the $35,000 of the principal in 3 days, they would go to Ms. Helena's house and seize her assets. Marcus ran around asking friends and former colleagues for money, but everyone turned their backs on him. Bad rumors that he had abandoned his wife for a mistress and failed in business had spread, and no one wanted to help him. Cornered, Marcus remembered some money he had secretly saved when he lived with me. It was the money he had been siphoning off my salary without giving it to his mother, about $60,000. He kept it in a personal safe in his bedroom, planning to use it as an emergency fund or for a promotion. That night, like the night they threw me out, it was pouring rain. Marcus, tormented by the idea that the next day was the deadline to pay the debt, came home drunk. He staggered into the bedroom, ready to take that money to settle accounts with the loan sharks and save his mother's house. But when he opened the door, he was met with a shocking scene. The closet was wide open, and all of Savannah's clothes and luxury handbags had disappeared. And most terribly, the small safe in the corner was open and completely empty. Not a single bill remained. Marcus, thinking it was a hallucination from the drunkenness, rubbed his eyes. He frantically searched the safe, but it was empty. All the money, his lifeline, had vanished. On the dresser, only a hastily written note with red lipstick remained. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I can't keep living this life of hardship with you. Consider this money compensation for my youth. Don't look for me. I've gone abroad. Goodbye." Marcus's blood ran cold, leaving him weak. Savannah had fled. She had not only abandoned him, but had taken every last penny, pushing him and his elderly mother into a dead end. "Damn tramp!" Marcus roared like a wounded beast. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his motorcycle keys and shot out of the house. "Marcus, where are you going? In this downpour?" Ms. Helena shouted when she heard the noise, but she could only watch as her son's back disappeared behind the curtain of rain. Marcus drove like a madman down the empty highway, only one idea in his head. "I have to find Savannah. I have to get the money back." He assumed she had fled to the airport or the bus station. The rain beat against his face, the alcohol clouded his mind, and hatred blinded him. He drove recklessly, running red lights and cursing out loud. Upon reaching a large intersection, the traffic light turned red, but Marcus didn't see it or didn't care. He accelerated to cross the intersection, chasing the ghost of the traitor. Just at that moment, a cargo truck came from the perpendicular road. The deafening blast of the truck's horn and the chilling screech of brakes on the wet asphalt. Boom! A terrible crash that seemed to swallow even the sound of thunder. Marcus's motorcycle was thrown dozens of yards, shattering into pieces, and Marcus's body, like a rag doll, flew through the air before falling onto the cold asphalt, rolling several times and lying motionless. Red blood gushed out, mixing with the rain and staining the road. The helmet, split in two, flew off to a corner. The terrified truck driver, pale as death, jumped out of the cab. Onlookers stopped, and a murmur of voices and cries for an ambulance mingled in the chaos. Marcus lay there, his eyes wide open, staring at the black sky. Raindrops fell like needles. In the last moments before losing consciousness, several images flashed through his mind. He saw his ex-wife, me, laughing happily with our daughter. He saw his elderly mother crying at the door. And he saw Savannah laughing over his pile of money. Everything faded into a muddy darkness and a pain that chilled him to the bone. An hour later, at Metropolitan General Hospital, Ms. Helena received the call from the police and collapsed. Crying inconsolably, she took a taxi and rushed to the hospital. But there, facing the doctor, she received even more terrible news, like a bolt from the blue. That night, Metropolitan General Hospital smelled of disinfectant and a faint scent of blood. The emergency room hallway was lit by the cold fluorescent lights, and the noise of gurneys rolling, nurses calling patients, and the sobs of relatives created a chaotic symphony on the border between life and death. Ms. Helena was huddled in a corner of the hallway. She wore a ragged pajama set, stained by the rain that had not yet dried. She stared at the closed operating room door, where her only son was fighting death. The red light above the operating room door shone with the same intensity as the blood that had spread on the road. "Relatives of the patient Marcus Vance?" a nurse asked, holding papers and speaking urgently. Ms. Helena stood up, staggering. Her hands and feet trembled so much that she almost fell. "I am his mother. How is my son?" "The patient is suffering from massive internal bleeding and complex cranial trauma. We are doing everything possible, but his condition is very critical. We need you to pay a deposit of $35,000 immediately to secure blood and specialized surgical equipment. If there is a delay, we cannot guarantee his life." $35,000. That figure again. It was like a 2,000-pound rock pressing down on her chest. "Wait a bit, please. I am calling someone who will bring the money," Ms. Helena begged, crying. "Hurry up. Your son's life hangs by a thread." The nurse turned coldly and walked in, leaving Ms. Helena alone in her despair. Ms. Helena, with trembling hands, pulled her cell phone out of her pocket. She didn't call me directly. At that moment, the first person who came to mind was not her repudiated ex-daughter-in-law, but the new daughter-in-law who carried the family lineage. She dialed Savannah's number. Only the dial tone sounded, long and endless. "The mobile phone you are calling is switched off." She called again, 2, 3, 10 times, but only heard the cold voice of the operator. She sent her a message, but what she saw was a cruel reality. Savannah's account had disappeared or been completely blocked. "That tramp! Where have you gone with my son's money? You killed my husband, Savannah!" Ms. Helena cried desperately, drawing the compassionate glances of the people around her. It was then that she remembered Marcus's words before he rushed out of the house. "She ran away. She left with all the money." Ms. Helena remembered the last few days. Savannah always said she loved Marcus, respected her mother-in-law, and promised to give her a son to continue the lineage. It was all a farce. She had planned everything for a long time. She bled him dry, encouraged Marcus to sell his car, take out loans, and when Marcus was left with nothing, she took every last cent from the safe and fled far away. "Oh my God, what ingratitude! I brought a tramp into the house. Son, my son, how foolish you were," Ms. Helena lamented, hitting her chest. But the tragedy did not end there. Her phone rang again. This time it was an incoming call, an unknown number. "Hello?" Ms. Helena answered in a weak voice. "Ms. Helena, right? Your son Marcus. He's hiding well with the debts he has. I heard he had an accident and is dying, huh?" A man's threatening voice said. It was the loan sharks. "Please leave us alone. My son is in emergency surgery right now." "I don't care if he's in the emergency room or hell," the man shouted. "The money I lent him is real. If he dies, you'll have to pay it. Know that we are right now in front of your house. The deed to the house may be mortgaged at the bank, but the furniture isn't. If you don't have the $35,000 principal and interest by tomorrow morning, I'll send my guys to empty the house, and then we'll go pay your son a visit at the hospital. You decide." Click, click, click. Ms. Helena dropped her hand weakly, and the phone fell to the floor, shattering the screen. It was a dead end. About to lose the house, her son dying, and without a penny, the golden daughter-in-law had fled, and the collectors were besieging her. Ms. Helena looked around, feeling the world crumble. She checked her address book, but her relatives did not answer or made excuses about being busy, fearing she would ask them for money. Her friends who surrounded her when she was rich now avoided her like the plague. In the midst of that anguish that clouded her mind, one person appeared in her head as a last lifeline. Arya. Yes, my ex-daughter-in-law. Arya. The same daughter-in-law she had insulted and kicked out, but she remembered that Arya was soft-hearted and sentimental. And most importantly, she had heard the rumor that she was now a director and was making so much money she couldn't even count it. If she was so rich, what was $35,000 to her? After all, Marcus was her daughter's father. She wouldn't be able to stand by and watch him die. Miss Helena reassured herself with that shameless and selfish thought. She picked up the phone and called me. She tried to pressure me into giving her the money, mixing the authoritative voice of her former position as a mother-in-law with the desperation of her current situation. And it all ended with my single question, "And who are you?" I rejected her coldly and firmly. When I hung up, Miss Helena sat stunned in the hospital hallway. Her last hope had vanished. She looked toward the emergency room door, and tears rolled down her old, wrinkled face. For the first time in her life, she felt a terrifying loneliness. She realized that she and her son had destroyed all affection and the possibility of salvation with their own hands. "Arya, I was wrong," she murmured. But that belated repentance was only heard by the four walls of the hospital. However, Miss Helena did not expect that on the other end of the line, I, the one who had hung up the phone, would not stand idly by. I was sitting in the living room, staring at the phone with the black screen. The tea had cooled, but my heart was burning, not out of concern for Marcus, but from a mixture of complex and indescribable emotions. I told Ms. Helena that I didn't care. I laughed at her audacity, but deep down in my heart, I was curious and had a desire to see the ending of the tragic movie they themselves had directed and starred in. I was not going to play the role of the savior that Ms. Helena expected. I wanted to confirm with my own eyes the price that traitors paid. I wanted to see the misery of those who had thrown me onto the street, and above all, I wanted to clearly show them the position of today's Arya. I got up and went to the dressing room. I did not choose the simple clothes I used to wear. I chose an elegant fitted black dress. Over it, I put on a sophisticated cream-colored blazer and paired it with a designer handbag and high heels that I had bought myself to celebrate the completion of a successful project. Light but defined makeup with a touch of authoritative red on my lips. In the mirror was a successful, self-assured, and proud woman. I was no longer the disheveled, kitchen-smelling Arya of last year. "Mom, I'm going out for an errand. Be good at home." I kissed Zola on the forehead and went out the door. I drove my car into the night. Upon arriving at Metropolitan General Hospital, I got out of the car. The sound of my heels resonated authoritatively on the hospital floor, standing out in the noisy, crowded space. The penetrating smell of disinfectant made me frown slightly. I remembered the day I gave birth to Zola in a humble, small-town hospital, without my husband and only with my mother's care. That memory made my steps firmer. In the distance, I saw Ms. Helena. She was huddled in a waiting chair with her head buried in her knees. She looked so small and miserable that if I hadn't looked closely, I would have mistaken her for a homeless person. I stopped in front of her. My shadow stretched long, eclipsing the light that illuminated her. Ms. Helena felt someone stop in front of her and slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were swollen, red, and lost. Seeing an elegant and beautiful woman looking down at her, she was stunned for a few seconds before recognizing me. "Arya? Is that you, Arya? You came?" Ms. Helena, like a shipwreck survivor grabbing a plank, jumped up and tried to take my hand. "Did you bring the money? Thank goodness. Heaven helped me. Hurry, the doctor is pressuring us to pay." I took a step back softly but firmly, avoiding her touch as if avoiding something dirty. "Calm down," I said with a cold, emotionless voice. "I didn't come to pay anything." Ms. Helena froze her hand in the air, her twisted smile disappeared, and surprise and anger began to surface on her face. "What? What are you saying? If you didn't bring the money, why did you come? To laugh at me?" "Yes," I replied, looking directly into her eyes with cruel sincerity. "I came to see what karma looks like in person. To see where the mother-in-law who threw her daughter-in-law's clothes onto the street on a rainy night is sitting now, and to see where the husband who hid his wife for a mistress is lying now." "Witch! Demon!" Ms. Helena shouted, pointing at me. "He's in there dying. How can you say that, you who were his wife?" "Oh, you seem to have forgotten," I mocked. 3 months ago, you and yours took that title away from me. Now I'm just a stranger, and a stranger has no obligation to save the life of the person who tried to kill her soul." I leaned closer and whispered in her ear so she wouldn't miss a single word. "Ms. Helena, the $35,000 you need is not a large sum for me. I could solve it with one signature right now, but I won't do it. Do you know why, Ms. Helena?" She looked at me stunned. Fear began to take hold of her. "Because with that money, I'd rather donate it to an orphanage or save abandoned street dogs than save a traitor like your son. At least those animals, if you feed them, wag their tails. You, mother and son, bite the hand that feeds you. Get out! Get out of here right now!" Ms. Helena, choked with rage, slumped into the chair, clutching her chest and gasping. At that moment, the emergency room door opened, and a doctor, removing his mask, came out with a serious expression. "Relatives of the patient, Marcus Vance?" Ms. Helena no longer seemed to have the strength to stand up. I looked at her once and turned to the doctor. "She is. How is he, doctor?" The doctor, thinking I was family, shook his head with a look of pity. "We managed to stop the bleeding, but the brain damage is so severe that unless a miracle occurs, he is very likely to remain in a vegetative state for life. Furthermore, the costs of the intensive care unit after the operation will be considerable. We are talking about several $100s a day, so the family must prepare mentally and financially. Vegetative state. Those two words fell like a death sentence, neither alive nor dead, a body without a soul lying as a lifelong burden for those left behind. Upon hearing those words, Ms. Helena's eyes rolled back, and she fainted in the chair. No one held her. Nurses ran to provide first aid. I observed the chaotic scene. I saw the woman who once gave orders, now slumped without strength, and the ICU door, where Marcus would now be, connected to tubes all over his body. I did not feel the satisfaction I had expected. I only felt a void and a kind of compassion for a life of greed and stupidity. They spent their whole lives fighting to snatch a piece of land, a little money from their daughter-in-law, and in the end, they were left only with a desolate future and empty hands. I was about to turn around. My purpose had been fulfilled. I had seen their end. But when I had taken a few steps, a cold, trembling hand suddenly grabbed my ankle tightly. I turned, surprised. Ms. Helena had woken up. She was not sitting in the chair. She had dragged herself across the floor to my feet. She hugged my legs and lifted her tear-stained face to look at me. There was no longer any pride or arrogance. "Aria, I beg you, please save my son." She rested her head on the cold hospital tile floor. Boom, boom, I was wrong. I'm a stupid old woman. I was cruel. I deserve death. But Marcus is still young. Aria, you who have the means, have mercy and give him a chance to live again as a person. I promise I will give you back all the money, even if I have to beg or work as a laborer. I will pay my debt by being your slave for life. A woman over 60 years old in the middle of a crowded hospital, kneeling at the feet of an elegant young woman, banging her head against the floor. Everyone passing by stared, whispering and pointing. Some would think I was an unnatural daughter. Others seemed to guess the situation. I looked at Ms. Helena at my feet, the woman who once ordered me to kneel and clean the floor, who counted every piece of meat I ate. Now she was kneeling at my feet. For a moment, a feeling of human compassion made me hesitate, but the reason of a woman who has suffered too much whispered to me, "Don't believe her." The promises of people like her are only valid when they are cornered. "Get up, stop the drama," I said, with a voice that was still cold but a little softer. "You'll pay back the debt? With what? You are about to lose the house, and your son is in a vegetative state. How are you going to pay?" Miss Helena, choked with sobs, couldn't speak. Prostrate at the tip of my heels, she clasped her hands and continued pleading. "Aria, I know you're angry with me and Marcus. I know I was wrong, but darling, they say you shouldn't hit the one who returns in repentance. After all, we were a family. We ate at the same table for 5 years. Don't you remember? When you arrived as a newlywed, I took you by the hand to the market. I taught you how to make that stew you liked so much. How can you forget all that affection?" I stopped and looked at the woman kneeling at my feet. Affection. She was trying to bring up the memories that, in her opinion, were good. I let out a sharp laugh. My dry laughter echoed in the hospital hallway. "Ms. Helena, you have a good memory. You remember the stew, but you don't seem to remember who had to get up at 5 in the morning to cook the meat and wash the vegetables. You remember taking me to the market, but you don't remember screaming at me, calling me a spendthrift because I bought some vegetables that cost $1 more by mistake." I bent down to look directly into her eyes and raised my voice. 5 years of eating at the same table? It's true. During those 5 years, I ate rice, bathed in tears. Do you remember that table where chicken stew was made? The thighs and wings were all for your son, and I got the neck and bones? You said a daughter-in-law had to be thin. You forgot, Ms. Helena? Speechless, Ms. Helena lowered her head, avoiding my sharp gaze, but continued pleading. "That's because the elders taught us that way. If I was strict with you, it was because I wanted you to grow up and run the house well. There was no malice. Marcus was wrong to hit you. But he's a man. He has a bad temper. Now he's in there between life and death. Arya, have mercy. For someone as rich as you, $35,000 is not much money. If you save him, we can start over. I will accept you back as my daughter-in-law. I will kick out that Savannah and make you the lady of the house. Even in this situation, she was still lost in her delusions of power. Did she think that being the daughter-in-law of Miss Helena's house was still a favor that I longed for? "Shut up!" I shouted, unable to contain the disgust anymore. "Don't talk to me in that tone of favor. Do you think I need your ruined house full of debts? Do you think I need that traitor husband in a vegetative state?" I took out a tissue, wiped my mouth after shouting, and continued with the coldest voice I could muster. "You were strict to make me grow up?" "No, Ms. Helena. You were not strict. You were cruel. You exploited my labor, took my salary, despised my parents, and to top it all off, that rainy night, you and your son threw me out like a dog onto the street, only because I didn't want to sell my parents' land to support his mistress. That cruelty is not a lesson. It is the vile nature that you and your son carry deep in your bones." Miss Helena trembled from head to toe. Every word of mine was like a knife tearing at her thick skin. "Save that man?" I pointed toward the ICU. "Why should I save the man who pushed me to the brink of death when I was thrown out, penniless, homeless, on a rainy night with my daughter? Did you feel pity for me? When your son hit my head until it bled, did you stop him? No, you insulted him from the side and encouraged him. Ms. Helena, sobbing, couldn't continue. "No one can escape karma, Ms. Helena. The suffering your son is experiencing now, the reality you are living, is the price of your bad actions. Don't blame heaven or others, blame yourself." I straightened up and adjusted my clothes. This conversation had exhausted me, but at the same time, it had allowed me to vent years of repressed anger. I had said everything I had to say, but Ms. Helena, desperate, still clung to the last lifeline. Although I had already punctured it, she covered her ears and refused to listen. "All right, I was wrong, and Marcus was wrong too. But darling, the child Savannah carries in her womb is family blood after all. How can you stand by and watch his father die and become a fatherless child from the womb? You are a mother too. Have mercy on the innocent child." She brought up the child again. She thought that if she appealed to my maternal instinct and kindness, she would soften me. But she didn't know that the truth about that child would be the final blow, the one that would end all her hopes. I looked at Ms. Helena. My gaze went from anger to compassion, a deep compassion for a fool until the very end. "You want to know the truth about that son so badly? All right, I'm going to show it to you so you can wake up once and for all, so you know why your son risked his life." I opened my handbag, took out my phone, and opened the file that a private detective had sent me 2 days earlier. I brought the illuminated screen of the phone close to Ms. Helena's stunned face. On the screen were several clear photos and message conversations. "Look closely. This woman is your precious daughter-in-law, Savannah, and this man is a real estate magnate from Chicago with a wife." The first photo showed Savannah and an overweight man affectionately hugging at a resort. The date of the photo was clear: 6 months ago. Can you count? 6 months ago, she was with this man. At that time, your son Marcus was at home with me, playing the role of the exemplary husband. I switched to the next photo. It was an ultrasound of Savannah's fetus taken at a private clinic. "Look at the estimated delivery date, Ms. Helena. This fetus is now more than 22 weeks old. That is, more than 5 months. But your son has only been with her for 3 months. Do you understand what that means, Ms. Helena, her eyes fixed on the screen, trembled and stammered. "No, it can't be. She told me she was 3 months pregnant. Her belly was small." "She fooled you," I mocked. "That woman is a professional. She knows how to dress, how to hide her belly. And here, this message is the most interesting." I opened the conversation between Savannah and a close friend. The black and white letters appeared as the most shameless confession. "Savannah, I'm pregnant with that old guy's baby. He's afraid of his wife and won't acknowledge it. He gave me $3,000 to abort, but I feel bad. The doctor says if I abort this time, I might become infertile. Friend, and what are you going to do? Savannah, raise it? With what? I'm hooking up with a good catch. His name is Marcus. He's an only son. He has a good house, and his mother is crazy about having a grandson. This guy is a weakling, easy to fool. A few things I say, and he'll believe everything. I'm going to make him believe he's the father. I'll have a place to live, money, and his mother, since she's old, will go crazy with joy. Maybe she'll even kick out the ex-wife and bring me into the house. Upon finishing reading the message, Ms. Helena looked as if lightning had struck her. She collapsed onto the floor, clutching her head with both hands and opening her mouth, but no words came out. All her world, her pride, the hope of continuing the lineage, everything she had used to justify her cruelty, was now shattered like a soap bubble. The old saying about raising someone else's children could not be truer. Her son Marcus had been the victim of the most painful scam of his life. He betrayed his wife, abandoned his family, and his dignity to follow a depraved woman, and in the end, it turned out, he was going to raise another man's child. He spent the money earned with his wife's sweat, even stolen money, to support a woman carrying another man's blood in her womb. And the most bitter part is that he had the accident trying to chase that scammer to get the money back. And he lay there waiting for death with a broken body. All for a lie. A stupid and vain death. "My God, son, why were you so foolish? I ruined you," Miss Helena cried with a heart-wrenching lament, hitting her head against the floor. Her crying was no longer feigned. It was the extreme pain of a mother who realized she had pushed her own son to his death. She helped a tramp destroy her son's home, kicked out a good daughter-in-law, and brought calamity and ruin. Do you understand now? I put the phone away and looked at her with compassion. This is the truth you have to face. There is no grandson, no kind daughter-in-law, just the stupidity and greed of you and your son. Arya, save him! Even if he was a fool, he is my son! Ms. Helena dragged herself back to my feet, but now without strength. Her voice was barely a whisper. I looked one last time at the ICU. Marcus deserved to be punished, but seeing him die deceived made me feel, on the one hand, pity for his life. However, pity would not make me bear the weight of that life again. Ms. Helena, I cannot pay the $35,000. That money is my daughter's future, the future of the same granddaughter you once mistreated, but out of a minimum of humanity, I won't let you starve here. I took a business card from my wallet and placed it in Ms. Helena's hand. This is the contact for a charity organization that helps seriously injured patients. My company often sponsors it. I will call and ask them to review Marcus's case for urgent aid. With luck, they may cover part of the hospital expenses. The rest, you will have to manage yourself. Sell the house, sell a property, take out a loan. That's your problem. This is as far as I can help. Having said that, I turned decisively and left. Behind me, I heard Ms. Helena's voice calling me. Arya, I'm sorry. I truly regret it. But I did not stop. Upon walking out the hospital door, a cold night wind blew, but strangely, I felt warmth in my heart. I had done the right thing according to my conscience. I did not take revenge by letting them die, but I was not stupid enough to let them use me again. I showed them the truth, and the truth was the cruelest judgment. Life is fair. Marcus, from that day on, would face eternal darkness or live with a lifelong disability. That was the price of betrayal. Savannah fled with the money, but she would never live in peace with scammed money. And Ms. Helena, the rest of her life, would be a hell of repentance and loneliness. And I looked at the starry night sky. Tomorrow, I would take my daughter to school again and go to work with burning passion. I would live a brilliant, independent, and happy life because I deserved it. As I walked out the door of Metropolitan General Hospital, the darkness of the night seemed to intensify behind me. The ambulance sirens continued to wail plaintively, but my heart was strangely calm. I left Ms. Helena behind with the cruel truth and extreme pain. However, my steps suddenly slowed down, not out of regret or with the intention of going back to pay the $35,000 and save that traitor. That money was my blood and sweat, my daughter Zola's future. Not even in my dreams would I think of spending it on the life of the man who tried to push my daughter and me to our death. But deep in my heart, the conscience of a human being remained. I was different from them. Even if they were my enemies, my pride would not allow me to be so cruel as to ignore a life fading away due to lack of money. I stopped by my car and took out my phone. I didn't call Ms. Helena, but a longtime partner of my company, Mr. Harrison, director of the Lovebridge Charity Foundation. Mr. Harrison, this is Aria. Sorry to call at this hour. Yes, there is an urgent patient at Metropolitan General Hospital, a young man very seriously injured in a car accident and from a humble family. Yes, his mother is elderly and frail, and they were scammed and lost all their money. They cannot pay for the operation. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. I would appreciate it if you would review his request for urgent aid. I vouch for him. Yes, only what the Foundation's bylaws allow. No, please, don't say I asked you. Just say you found out through the hospital. Upon hanging up, I let out a sigh of relief. It was the last and most dignified thing I could do for Marcus. I didn't take the money out of my own pocket, but with my credibility, I opened a path of salvation for him. I did it not because any spousal affection remained, but because I wanted to accumulate good karma for my daughter. I wanted to be able to say proudly in the future that I lived doing the right thing as a human being, with nothing to be ashamed of. I looked into the distance toward the hospital lobby. Ms. Helena was still sitting there, clutching the card I had left her, looking desolate and shrunken, like a dry leaf before a storm. The $35,000 she would never receive from me. She would have to bear the weight of her life herself. She would have to sell the 4-story house that was her pride to pay the debts and her son's medical expenses. That was the price she had to pay. I opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat. The soft scent of the perfume inside enveloped me, erasing the disgusting smell of disinfectant. My face in the rearview mirror looked a little tired, but my gaze shone with firmness. "Goodbye, past," I whispered. I started the engine, and the car glided smoothly onto the empty road. I thought of Zola, who would be sleeping peacefully at home. Tomorrow morning, when she woke up, I would tell her a different story. A story about a mom who fought a wicked dragon to protect the happy castle of mother and daughter. I would teach my daughter that kindness is valuable, but it must be offered to the right people. I would teach her not to let anyone trample on her self-worth and always to have a way out, economic independence, because when the storm comes, the strongest support is your own 2 legs and the money you have earned yourself. That night, I slept soundly, without dreams. The 5-year nightmare and the echo of the call in the middle of the night had completely ended. With a civilized and firm cut, I had severed the disgusting thread of destiny, but life continued. Time, like sand between the fingers, brought unexpected changes, and karma, the fairest judge, delivered its final sentence for all of us in a way no one could avoid. 2 years later, on a cold, late afternoon in Atlanta, the whole city was busy preparing for Christmas. I was standing in my 20th floor office, looking out at the city full of blinking lights. On my desk, a shining plaque read, Aria Monroe, Vice President. In the last 2 years, I hadn't stopped striving. From being a woman abandoned by her husband and kicked out by her mother-in-law, I became one of the key executives of the group. I bought a luxury penthouse with views of the Atlanta skyline and brought my parents to live with me. Zola, now in 1st grade, attended an international school and grew up intelligent and beautiful like her mother. My life was now full of laughter and peace. I enjoyed traveling abroad with my valuable friends and, above all, absolute freedom. Successful men sometimes approached me, but I was not in a hurry. I fully enjoyed the happiness of being a proud single woman. On Christmas Eve afternoon, I drove out to buy decorations for my new home. While waiting at a traffic light at a busy intersection, a scene on the sidewalk chilled me. On the cold sidewalk of a busy commercial street, an elderly woman with completely white hair, dressed in old, ragged clothes, was sitting on the ground. She was trying to feed spoon by spoon a gruel to a man sitting in an old wheelchair next to her. The man was skin and bones, with twisted hands and feet and a crooked mouth. His empty eyes stared into the infinite, and drool ran down, soaking the dirty bib on his chest. Although the dust of time and hardships had left them in a miserable state, I instantly recognized that they were Ms. Helena Vance and Marcus Vance. Marcus had not died. The operation saved his life, but the severe sequelae of the brain damage left him hemiplegic, losing the ability to speak and cognitive capacity, living like a vegetable. He became a child in a giant's body, feeling nothing. He depended completely on others for all his daily needs, like eating and bathing. And Ms. Helena, after selling the house in the upscale neighborhood at a low price to pay the debts and hospital expenses, was left with nothing. With the money she had left over, she could barely afford to rent a moldy room in a humble neighborhood. The mother-in-law, who was once arrogant and authoritarian, had now become the lifelong servant of her disabled son. The traffic light would take 30 seconds to change. I rolled down the car window a little to see better. "Eat, honey. One more spoonful. Mama is asking you," Ms. Helena pleaded in a hoarse, tearful voice. With trembling hands, she brought the gruel to Marcus's mouth, but he had a slight seizure and knocked over the bowl. The hot gruel splattered on both their clothes. Ms. Helena burst into tears. While cleaning the gruel off her son's clothes with her hands, she beat her chest. "My God, why is my life so hard? I wish you had died then. It would have been a relief. Savannah, you tramp, you ruined us." Marcus, sitting there, made senseless sounds and cried with his soulless eyes. Perhaps deep in his shattered subconscious, he still felt pain and regret, but he couldn't speak or move to atone for his sins. He was trapped in the prison of his own body, forced to watch his elderly mother suffer every day because of him. That was a punishment more terrible than death. Seeing the scene, I no longer felt hatred in my heart, only a sadness for the fleetingness of life. I had heard the rumor that Savannah, the appreciated future daughter-in-law, after fleeing with the money, was discovered by her lover, the magnate, who took all the money from her and now lived miserably hidden near the border. Truly, everyone reaps what they sow. They once tried to take everything from me and corner me, but in the end, their own greed and malice plunged them into an abyss they could not escape from. Ms. Helena lifted her head, and her gaze fell upon my luxury car. She probably didn't see me through the tinted windows, but she saw the wealth she craved and once possessed. In her eyes were envy, regret, and despair. Not even in her wildest dreams would she imagine that the person sitting in the car was the same daughter-in-law she had kicked out for being useless. The traffic light turned green. I rolled up the window and stepped on the accelerator. The car glided forward, leaving behind the image of that miserable couple in the middle of the bustling crowd. I did not stop to give them money, nor did I get out of the car to humiliate them again. My silence and my departure were the clearest answer. We now belonged to different worlds. I drove home. There, my parents and my daughter were waiting for me for Christmas Eve dinner. When I reached the door, Zola ran out and hugged me. "Mom, you're here! Grandpa and Grandma were waiting for you for soup." I hugged my daughter, smelled the aroma of her hair, and felt the warmth of family spreading through my body. "I'm here, my love." Seeing the Christmas table full of laughter, my healthy parents and my good daughter, I smiled contentedly. This was true happiness. A happiness built not on calculations and deception, but on true love, effort, and kindness. Final message from the channel. Dear subscribers of A Quiet Old Age, we have reached the last chapter of the tumultuous story of Arya, Marcus, and Ms. Helena. The screech of a wheelchair on the street, the lament of an elderly mother full of belated repentance, and the image of a luxury car disappearing into the Christmas Eve night. All these scenes dance before our eyes. leaving a profound resonance and emotions that words cannot fully express. One story has ended, but in the heart of each of us, thousands of thoughts bloom about the various facets of life, human duty, and the journey to find true happiness in this turbulent world. How about today, as we share a hot cup of tea, we reflect on the deep meaning of this story so that we can extract painful but applicable lessons for our own lives and live in a more serene, more dignified, and brighter way? The first and most powerful lesson this story gives us is how justly and sometimes cruelly the law of cause and effect works. We often hear the saying, "You reap what you sow." But only after witnessing the end of Ms. Helena's family do we feel true respect for this immutable law of the universe. Karma is not a divine judgment, but the inevitable result of the actions, words, and thoughts we sow in the world. Ms. Helena and Marcus sowed the seeds of greed, selfishness, betrayal, and cruelty, and in the end, they had to swallow that poisonous fruit themselves. The image of Marcus in a wheelchair, unable to speak or move, crying with soulless eyes, is a punishment more terrible than death. He is trapped in the prison of his own body, forced to helplessly witness the suffering of his elderly mother and the ruin of his family. It is the price of betrayal and weakness. Ms. Helena, also stripped of her former authority, must spend the rest of her life in repentance and loneliness, sitting on the street feeding her son. The lesson this gives us is clear. You cannot build your own happiness on the suffering of others. What is obtained by vile means eventually vanishes like smoke. Live with kindness. Keep a pure heart. That is the strongest shield that will protect us from all the storms of life. But the brightest part of this story is Arya's dazzling resurgence. She symbolizes the strength, dignity, independence, and deep compassion of the modern woman. She lifted herself up from the depths of pain, wiped away her tears, and rewrote her life. The lesson Arya gives all women is to be independent and self-sufficient. Do not leave your life and happiness in the hands of others. When we are economically independent, we have a voice, we are respected, and we have the right to choose. Turn pain into strength, and the world's contempt into a motor to fly higher. The attitude Arya showed at the hospital teaches us about the limits of self-respect and dignified forgiveness. She did not sacrifice her future to save her enemy, but she fulfilled her minimal duty as a human being. It was not revenge, but a way to save her own soul. Letting go of hatred is not forgetting the past, but accepting it and moving forward. Life is short and unpredictable. Instead of wasting time on regrets or hatred for the past, we must take care of the present. Love yourselves more, take care of your health, acquire knowledge, and spend time with the people who truly matter. No matter what difficult situation you find yourselves in, if you never give up and constantly strive according to your conscience, a radiant morning, like a rainbow, will always await you at the end of the dark tunnel, just like Arya, who used tragedy as a springboard to fly higher. If this story has resonated deeply in your hearts and you have found a valuable lesson in it, I ask you to help spread these human values. A like from you is a great encouragement, and sharing it can be a gift of light for someone who is desperate somewhere. And most importantly, subscribe right now to my channel and turn on notifications. Next time, I will return with another moving life story. Your company is the biggest driver for us to continue sharing love and hope. Thank you for listening. May peace always be in your hearts, warmth in your chests, and love in your lives. Goodbye.